We are talking about emotional eating. So last week we took a quiz, or those of you that were on the call, some of you who may have done the replay, you took a quiz about emotional eating. And we're going to go through that again tonight and give you the answers. And the idea is that at the end of this, you will have an absolute idea of which parts and what your triggers are for your binge eating, secret eating, emotional eating, so that you've then got much more of a chance of fixing it, so you know what to work on and what you actually need to do. And over the next couple of weeks after that, I'm going to be looking into that and self-sabotage and seeing if I can help you in some way. And then if you want to go further with this, you can then do some one-to-one work with me or group work. Haven't quite decided how we're going to do that yet. That's in action at the minute. I'm just working around that, but that's the idea. So last week we talked about this need for the subconscious to get a place of ease and away from pain. So that is the subconscious's absolute, if you like, day job. It will always try to find a place of ease and comfort and get you away from pain at all costs. And we talked about how we learned to use food to do that for us from a very early age, from the way that we're brought up, from the things that happen. I talked about my two grandchildren with the sweets. Their other grandmother, every time they fall over or hurt themselves, out comes a sweet from the handbag, and that's giving them that knowledge that sweet things take away pain from a very early age. And there's no judgment there. It's, we only know what we know, and I would know because of my training and what I do, that that's not a helpful thing to do, because what it's doing is actually setting them up for sugar addiction or far too much of using sugar to help them ease their pain. So we only know what we know, and people do everything they do with the very best of intentions. So we did the quiz, and I asked you to add up all the calories in a week that you would eat extra because of the different types of emotional eating. Did anybody actually do that? Or were you too scared and frightened to know what the answer was? Did anybody add up the calories? Like I say, when I added mine up, I think it was somewhere in the region of 5,800 calories extra a week I would, or less a week I would save if I didn't eat emotionally. That's not now, that's quite some time ago when I was doing my training. So I wonder whether I can't see because I'm too scared. Yeah, I totally get that, Lynn. I know. And the thing is, a lot of this stuff is quite scary. It's like almost we want to know how to solve this problem, but we don't, because we've been doing it for so long that we're scared of change and we're scared of where we're going to go from here. But it is absolutely 100% possible to be free of this. But it does take guts and it does take a bit of work, but the relief at the end of it, it just allows you to get on and live your life without being in that bondage of food cycle all the time. So we did the quiz and I asked you to add up all the calories. Some of you did. Some of you didn't. I haven't got anybody who's saying that they did, so maybe they're not on. I know there's a few people from last week on holiday this week, so they're going to have to watch it on replay. Embarrassing. Yeah. So you've got some awareness now. Even if you don't know a number, you have got some awareness of how many calories it's like to be, or that it's probably likely to be quite a large amount, even though most of you have already had your surgery. So we can see that if we could remove our emotional eating, regardless of our surgery or surgery type, how much more successful we would be, not only in our weight loss, which, let's face it, that's the main reason why most of us have it, but also in our psyche, because we wouldn't be beating ourselves up all the time. But I suppose the main thing as well is that we would feel successful in what we try to do. So we're not constantly relying on food to make us feel better, and we're not in that cycle of eat, feel guilty, feel pain, eat, feel guilty, feel pain, eat. And that I just remember being constantly thinking about food all the time, what I was going to eat, what I have eaten, what I can eat, what I can't get away with, how many calories that's got in it, how many carbs. And to be mainly free from that is amazing. Now I do have strategy, and I do make sure that I stick to certain guidelines because I have got obesity and I'm always going to have it, so I've got to do those things. But I'm definitely not obsessed with that food whirlwind, I call it the washing machine brain anymore. So, however, you've got some awareness now of where they might come from, and I'm going to tell you that the answers a bit more now. But self-awareness is really good, and it is really the beginning of our journey of change. You can't change without it. If you don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it and where that's coming from, you cannot change. However, that is not change itself. Many people are self-aware. I will get coaching clients all the time that say, I know where my emotional eating started. It started here. Now, they may or may not be right. Sometimes they are. Quite often they're not. They think it's there, but then when we look at it, it's actually somewhere else. But if self-awareness was enough, they wouldn't need me to help them, because they would have just go, I know where that came from. Fine, okay, get on with my life now. But it's not that simple. But you need to understand the reasons for your behaviours before you can change them. So it may stop you to a certain extent, but it doesn't usually stop you completely. Okay, depending on how deep grained they are and which one of these are. So some of the sensation drivers, yes, you can stop, and I'll talk about those in a minute. So we've had many, many years of behaving in a certain way, and this knowledge and awareness is the first step before change. But, it might give you a bit of separation between you and the behaviour. So what it might do is make you go, oh, yeah, that's that Amanda talked about in the emotional eating. Maybe I'm not going to do that. So it'll start to give you a choice. But often these drivers, we talked about the drivers last week, are so ingrained and so subconscious that we just have lost the power of choice. Anybody feel like that? Anybody feel sometimes that you've just completely lost the power of choice over eating? That even though you, with every bone in your body, want to eat, but you've just lost the power of choice. You just don't have a choice. You just got to do it. So anybody who feels like that on the call. Okay. I know there was times definitely, and I feel, and there still is sometimes, if I'm really emotionally upset, Lynn says yes, yeah. If I'm really emotionally upset, I just sometimes just don't. I just find myself going in the kitchen, getting something, eating it, and there is no choice. It's almost like an alcoholic, it's just, I've got to throw it down my neck. Michelle says, yeah, okay. So we need to undo these drivers at a feelings level. So tonight, we're going to find out what they are. And then the next couple of weeks, I'm going to teach you some ways of trying to undo the drivers. Do you know what? I watched this back last night because I did a what do they call it? A watch party. And God, I use my hands a lot. It drives me mad. I'm like, you must be dizzy, absolutely dizzy. I can't help it. It's just the way I am. I have to accept it or change it, and I can't change it, so I'm going to accept it. So, so it's a bit like the X Factor, you've got the results. Have you got your pen and paper? Hopefully with the answers to your questions from the week before. Now, if you answered yes to all the questions, that is absolutely fine because they are all interlinked. I answered yes to every single one of them. I am a massive emotional eater. And I say am because that is my default setting. I have now got ways of combating that, and most of the time I'm not, but I still can go back into it. So if you didn't say any, then great, you're not an emotional eater. You might know somebody who is. You might want to watch this to find out that. But so just to recap quickly what we said last week. We said that the behaviour, which is the eating behaviour, the binging, the secret eating, the yo-yo dieting, all of that is a behaviour. And we concentrate on that behaviour because we think, I need to change that behaviour. So I'll go on a diet. I won't eat anything after 6 o'clock. I won't eat any carbs. I'll go keto. All of these things we do to try to control or manage the behaviour. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to just turn my phone off. And it's not the behaviour that is the problem. The behaviour is the solution to the feelings and the drivers behind the feelings. So we've got these drivers that, we've got these drivers that then drive us to do the behaviour because we're feeling a certain way. Or we need a certain, I said to ease, change, or create something. And then you've got the payoff for the eating behaviour, which is there is always a reason for doing it. And you might think there isn't, but there is, which we're going to talk about payoff next week. And then you've got the fallout. Now, you'll be very, very aware of the fallout. The fallout is, oh shit, I've done it again. Oh, God. Why did I said this morning at 9 o'clock that I wasn't going to do that today? I wasn't having any chocolate tonight and I've done it again. You're very aware of the fallout and you're probably very aware of the behaviours. The bits that you won't be aware of, and they're the most important bits, because that's what creates this behaviour and the fallout, is the drivers behind why and the payoffs as what you get out of it. So what you're looking for when you do it, and then what you get out of it immediately after or just before you do that behaviour. And that's where the healing is. That's where the magic is in finding out those things. Okay? So, without much further ado, we're going to give you the answers. All right? So, test A, question 1, was, do you eat a specific food, or is there a specific food or food type that you just cannot say no to? Okay, so if you answered yes to that question, can you put it in the box? Just yes. And basically, if you said yes to this question, what that's saying is that you've got a pleasure association with a particular food that's been locked in for so long. So like me with my flakes that I talked about last week, it's not necessarily an emotion, it's more of a sensation that you're looking after. Or if it is connected with a love with someone, then it's also an emotional driver. So for me, it was both. It's a sensation and it was also an emotional driver as well. Okay, so Rosalind and Michelle said yes. So you've got a pleasure association with a particular food that is locked in from very early on. And if you can identify when you think that started, then you've got some chance of changing that. But we talk about that later. So, question 2 is, do you reward yourself with food? Okay. Do you reward yourself with food? If you answered yes to this, put that down, please. If you reward yourself with food, it's fairly self-explanatory. It's a reward driver for the pleasure the food gives you. Okay? So you are rewarding yourself with food. It's a reward driver. It's like you've been taught from an early age that you get a reward for things. And the main thing that gives you the quickest buzz is the food. Okay? So again, it's a sensation. I am good. I am worthy. I have done something amazing. And I've got to create that sensation of feeling rewarded. Okay. Next one. Question 3, and the reason why I'm asking you these is because then when we look at them, you can go through and say, I need to unravel that one, I need to unravel that one, don't need to unravel that one, and each of you will have a completely separate list of things that you need to work on. So, question 3, do you find yourself eating without even thinking about it? So you walk past this fruit bowl, before you know it, there's a grape in your mouth, or you walk past, I don't know, the sweet bowl and this is a good one for me, yeah, and the beautician, she's got a big thing of sweet. Before I know it, I've unwrapped a sweet and it's in my mouth. I've not even thought about it. Totally unconscious. Okay, so if you do, question 3, test A, question 3, this is where you've got such a deep pleasure association with food that it isn't even conscious. It's what we call a hardwired habit that's become unconscious. So if you're in any difficulty, pain or discomfort, you unconsciously go to food to ease it. It's a hardwired habit. And to some extent, it's got to the stage where it's so hardwired that even if you're not in discomfort, difficulty or pain, it can just be what we call an environmental trigger. See it, got to have it. See it, oh, food. Before I know it, it's in. It's like a complete environmental trigger. You know, most advertising works on that. You'll see a great big billboard with an ice cream on it, and before you know it, you've got a Solero in your mouth. You've not even thought about it. You've got into the shop and you've got a Solero because subliminally, which is working on your subconscious mind, that advertising has reminded you that you need or you like an ice cream. Okay? So, that is question 3A. So, test A, question 4. Do you have any particular times of the day or week where you like to eat certain foods? If you answered yes to this one, you have got what we call a pleasure association around events and times of the day or the week. So you need to do something at that particular time to make you feel happy because you've, again, been used to it for so long. So the evening, somebody's put, yeah, okay? Now, think about this. If you've got a pleasure association with certain kinds of food, which Michelle said, and you're eating these foods at this time, because you've got a pleasure association with eating at this time, and you've got a pleasure association with rewarding yourself at this time, you know, get over that. How are you going to do that? How are you going to stop that when you've got these 3 ingrained pleasure associations that are not conscious, they're subconscious, and it is almost impossible to just by thought stop that. Okay? Knowledge is not going to control it. They come together like a love affair and you just feel you can't do anything about it. Okay? So if you've got 2 or 3 of these, it's really, really difficult because you're looking for pleasure all the time in all these different places. Could go all day with it, eating in the evenings, I can't help it or stop myself, because you've associated, you know, almost like restriction and pain, and you get to the end of the day and that pain is so much that you've got to have the pleasure, and wham, all the food comes in because it's a certain time of day, and it's almost like I can reward myself now because I've finished, I've done all my work, I can sit down, the kids are in bed, blah, 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 and I've got to get away from that pain of stopping myself all day. So, question A5, do you have rituals around food? So, like I said last week, people separate Smarties and eat the orange ones last, or dunking chocolate biscuits into a cup of tea. I mean, I have one where I like to sit down on the sofa in the evening. Again, that's my thing. But whenever I have a treat or reward myself with chocolate, my husband and I have chocolate, and I dunk the chocolate in my tea. I know it's gross because I like the melted taste of the chocolate. So that's a ritual. A ritual around food. What's your ritual, Michelle? So if you've answered yes to question 1, 3, 4 and 5, you are doing this on a repeated basis, which is unconscious. So you look forward to that food group on a particular day, that particular food group on a particular day, in a particular way, and often as a reward. So like Michelle said, in the evening. And that usually is a reward for finishing the day successfully. So, you know, this pleasure association is so ingrained and it becomes completely automatic. Most people have got pleasure associations because we're human and it's part of the human condition to seek pleasure and ease. And they're often set up in childhood when we find out that food is pleasure and happiness, and these food types and times can be completely ingrained. So, for example, my son, when I lived on my own with him, we were lucky. Yeah, see, Lynn? Realisation, you dunk biscuits. Yeah, so that's a ritual. It's a type of ritual. So when my son was very little and his dad left, we split up, and I was very, very busy. I was working mum and I was trying to keep everything together, and one night a week we'd have, which was Friday night, and it was called Sydney night. And my little boy, he'd be about 4 years old, and he'd go, is it Sydney night? Sydney night, mummy? And he used to sit on my knee, we'd watch a film, and we'd get crisps and biscuits and chocolate and whatever it was. And that, you know, was a pleasure association that was so ingrained in him that still now with his girlfriend, they have Sydney night on a Friday night. Yeah? So, yeah, again, that is a pleasure association because he looked forward to Sydney nights so much. So pleasure is a feeling or a driver that everyone tries to get. It's what the body craves for. It's to move away from pain and into pleasure. And we have them because basically we're bloody human. It's part of the human condition. Okay? But when we have lots of these around food and we're using food on a regular basis, these pleasure or sensation drivers can really, really drive our emotional eating. Okay, so you should have an idea of whether you have got sensation or pleasure drivers and which ones are going on for you. Now, if you've got all of them, you are really using food for pleasure and sensation. Okay, so that was sensation and pleasure drivers. Test B. Question 1, test B is, do you use food for love and connection? So, we've got a basic human need for love and connection. It's a human need, and I'm going to talk about basic human needs a little later on. I'll explain what those mean, but everybody wants it. We all want to feel loved and connected. It's a feeling driver. So food does this. If you want to feel love, you can mix that with your pleasure driver group or ritual, then how powerful is that? Okay, so again, harping back to the flake thing with the grandma, she used to scoop me up, give me a big hug. I'd look at her, she'd say, go on, you know where they are. I'd run to the bar, come out with 2 flakes. And all of that was a ritual, had to be 2. It was a pleasure of seeing my grandmother, who I absolutely adored. It was a loving connection. It was a specific food and foods type. And it wasn't necessary, well, it was always at weekends as well, so I suppose it was like a time and day, although I don't think that was a big driver. It would be whenever I saw her. But throw all that in together, and it's very not surprising why I find it incredibly difficult to have a Cadbury's flake in the house. And if I do, it calls my name. Yeah? So, test B1 was a no for you. Okay, Lynn. So you don't feel that the crisp association was anything to do with getting love and connection from anybody in your life? No? Okay. Interesting. I'd love to have a look at that. I really would. However, there you go. So, test B. Question 2, do you use food for variety and excitement? So this was when I said, like, when I used to go on holiday, I don't do it now, but when I used to go on holiday, the first thing I'd look at was the reviews on the restaurants in the hotel, how many different restaurants, it was all inclusive, if there was 6 or 7 restaurants, that was a massive tick. If there was only one, I was like, well, I'm going to get bored with that. I needed variety. I used food. And to be fair, because I was getting bigger and bigger, there wasn't that much left in my life that I could get variety from. I couldn't do sports. I didn't like going to things that were group activities because I felt everybody was watching me. I was becoming quite insular. I could cope with going for restaurants because there was an addiction there with the food, but also because that was where I got my variety from. So, food reviews have to be fab. Yes, this is me. Who said that? Michelle. Yeah. B2, no. Okay. So, Michelle, yes, and Lynn, no. Okay. So, again, if variety is a basic human need, we all need variety in some way. And so we'll all get it from different places. That's why things like circuit training is really took off, because it was variety. If you ask somebody to just run, they get bored, they don't want to do it, they get fed up. But if you just ask somebody to do a little bit of that, little bit of that, little bit of that, little bit of that, and eating, for example, my husband and I will always get different foods. We never get the same, so we can have a little bit of each. It's that variety. I mean, it's a massive driver for me, variety in food. Okay, question 3. Do you use food for security or safety? So again, or certainty. That again is what we call a basic human need. Okay, so it's basic human need, security, safety. Yeah, diets tried, get bored with eating the same thing. Absolutely, Michelle. Yeah, so you go on it a couple of weeks, absolutely on it like a carb on it, and then, oh, I can't bother with that, bored. So, you use food, Lynn, for security and safety. So it feels safe. You feel safe, you feel at ease, you feel certain. Okay, again, that's another basic human need. We all need to feel safe and secure. And I will talk about these later. But what we have to do when it's a basic human need that's driving the eating, we can't remove that as such. What we have to do is swap it out. So, Lynn, for example, if I was working with you, what I would do is try and find a way for you to find that security, safety and certainty in a different way. And Michelle, I don't know whether you said that, makes you happy. Yeah, that might be a sensation driver, but if it gives you a sense of safety and security, then we need to swap that out. We need to swap the variety, get variety from a different place. Get the love and connection from a different place. Okay, comforting and makes you happy. Okay, good. Well, not good, but I understand what you're saying. So if you can see that test A was all about sensations and sensation drivers, basically. And test B was all about human needs, basic human needs. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. So, test C. This is the biggie. Test C, question 1. Do you have a recurring core feeling? Do you have a recurring core feeling? Which means that you are just absolutely cannot, it's like comes in here, hits you, you just don't know what to stop, you just can't do anything about it. It's like stays there and it's just overwhelming. You can't get away from it, and it can stay hours, days, weeks. So anybody got what I call a recurring core wound or core feeling that makes you eat? So it grips your heart, won't let go, stays with you for hours, days, weeks. Many people have a core emotion problem. Anybody say that they've got this? Lynn, Michelle, any of you? There's only 2 of you that are partaking. Yes or no? Tell me yes or no. No. Yes. Okay. What's that core feeling, Michelle? What is it? Do you know what it is? Len, you don't know. Okay. Is Michelle there? She can tell us. Okay. So, for example, you may have a core feeling of abandonment or loneliness. Or, anxiety is too wide a thing. We need to drill deeper into it. So what actually is the feeling? So loneliness, abandonedness, not good enough, those types of core feelings that we have. So if you didn't have that core feeling, Michelle, what percentage of your eating would just disappear, do you think? What I find is that when I work with a client on their core feelings, the behaviour of the eating just starts to dissolve once you manage that core feeling. Because you spend so much time with that core feeling of not being good enough. And it comes up and it's triggered. And it's an underlying undercurrent that just sits with us and feels, but then it comes up and whams us and then it goes back. But it's always there. It's just like this little gremlin, if you like, in the middle of the summer, in the bottom of your You know, what is a feeling? Michelle, it's really interesting that you find it hard to answer. And I'll tell you why. Because what tends to happen is that most people think they don't have a lot of people think they don't have a core feeling. Or they know that there's something, but they can't identify it. And that is because you've been stuffing your feelings down for so long with food and not feeling your emotions that you can't even name them. You don't know what they are. You just know it's a feeling and it doesn't feel very good. And that is one of the big parts of this emotional eating mastery, is to actually sit with our feelings, identify them, name them, realise that they're not going to kill us, realise that they're not going to hurt us, just absolutely learn that they're there for a reason. Yeah, it's so true. Okay. And part of this, the biggest part of the emotional eating course that I do, is to identify and learn to sit with those feelings, identifying what they are, where they are, what they feel like. And I'm going to talk about wrapping feelings in a minute, and hopefully you'll understand that as well. So, you may have a core feeling but be numbing it with food and not be aware of it. You really do not have an intense emotions or feelings at all because you've got used to pushing your feelings away with food. So you're numbing it and keeping it away. And both of you are at the moment said that, you know, that you feel that. So some people don't eat around the core feelings. So for example, when you're anxious, you don't eat. If it's really, really bad, it's like, you know, you can say the heartbreak diet, where you get dumped and you just can't eat and you lose like a stone in 3 weeks. But the minute that you start to feel better again, the eating comes back in. So when it goes low level, goes back into its place and it just goes low level, just that uncomfortableness, that's when the eating really comes back in, because you've not dealt with the emotions and the feelings. Okay. So question 2, do you use food when you have an everyday feeling or problem? So like, for example, an argument with your partner, you're in a traffic jam, somebody cuts you up. Do you use food for that? So does it sit with you for longer than it needs to? Do you know, some people would have an argument in the morning, they've forgotten about it in the evening, and you're sitting thinking about it all day and eating on it. Okay. Anybody say yes to everyday feelings? Yes, Lynn? Yeah, okay. So this comes back to having what I call an emotional mastery problem. It's you just don't have the skill base to move and soothe those feelings internally. So you find difficulty managing your emotions, or even identifying, knowing what they are, naming them, feeling them. And the very most important thing is to work on mastering these emotions and feeling your feelings. It's the very first part of the healing. How can you deal with your core feeling, which is that one that takes your breath away, if you struggle with the skill to move and soothe just your everyday feelings internally? There's some fear or difficulty in managing your internal world. So I'm going to explain that in more detail in a minute. But you've got to learn how to deal with everyday feelings first without them taking over and staying in your head and that washing machine brain. So we're still talking about drivers towards the eating behaviour. So, for example, we've got a sensation driver. I want pleasure, so I'm going to eat. We've got a feelings driver. I want to feel loved, so I'm going to eat. We've got a core feeling driver. I am feeling so overwhelmed, core feeling, I'm going to eat. And then we've got a everyday feeling drive. I've had an argument with my husband, I'm going to eat. So before you know it, you're just eating all the time without any understanding of why you can't stop. And surgery helps because it stops us, but it doesn't take the feelings away. And this is why that most of the time people struggle after having surgery, because you've taken the solution to the problems away. You've taken the food behaviour away because you just literally cannot do it. You literally can't. You physically can't do it. But it doesn't stop all those feelings of anxiety. I hear so many people saying, I'm so many days out of surgery, I feel really anxious, I should feel on top of the world, I've lost 12 stone, I feel rubbish, I don't understand. And it's because your solution, which was your food, to these emotional mastery problems and these sensations and these learnt behaviours has been removed. But all that stuff stays there. So this is why eventually a lot of people put quite a bit of the weight back on, because they will find a way around their tool. And as it grows and stretches a little bit, you can eat a little bit more, and then you start to allow craving foods back in. Then the physiology of craving food comes in. I'm going to talk about that in a session at some time. And you start to perhaps pick all day instead, make a big meal last for longer. All of these things so that you're using food to help soothe, ease, or shift some of this stuff. So, okay, the next one, number 3. These are now your eating behaviours. They're quite self-explanatory, so it tells you what you need to work on. So if you are caught in a eating hate cycle, what I call you're in pain, or you feel uneasy or bored or some sort of feeling, you eat to ease it, you feel guilty, you're in more pain, you eat again. That's what I call the F it button. And then you feel guilty and you eat again, and you feel guilty and you eat again, and it's a vicious cycle. And that, basically, the driver for that is that you've got low self-esteem. So you do not believe that you're worthy. You don't believe that you're worth the weight loss, or you're worth the success. Okay, question 4 was, are you a secret eater? So that's self-explanatory. That's just your behaviour of eating. You're a secret eater. And question 5A was a planned binge eater. And question 5B was an unplanned binge eater. So, for example, if you've answered this, if you've got an unplanned binge eater, but you're also unconsciously aware of when you're eating, and you've got the association of pleasure and love, then you're just going to be continually eating. This is what I'm scared of. I haven't had surgery yet, but no, I'll probably put it all back on again because my issues haven't been sorted in my brain. Well, it's unlikely, Michelle, that you'll put it all back on, because even without looking at this stuff, it is still the most successful way of losing weight and keeping weight off. Their statistics are that only 5% of people that go on a traditional diet and exercise program keep the weight off for more than a year. The statistics for weight loss surgery are that 40% of people put some weight back on, but not all of it. Most people, about 80% of people, keep at least 50% of it off for over 5 years. So it is a much better statistics. However, if you work on all this stuff with somebody like me, and I would suggest it doesn't have to be me, but if you do it, it really needs to be somebody that understands eating behaviours and understands bariatric surgery, and understands it's not just like a therapist that just does like cognitive behavioural therapy. It really needs to be somebody who understands emotional eating, self-sabotage, that type of thing. If you work on this, it's the very best gift you can give yourself at the same time as a surgery, because it will absolutely free you up from that fear of putting the weight back on, and it gives you not just strategy but accountability, and also releases all of this stuff. So then you can be really confident that you'll be successful and keep it off. I'm 6.5 years out. I've put some back on. Everybody does. It's very, very rare that anybody, unless they cut out absolutely everything in their life, and I was not prepared to do that. I wanted a good life where I wasn't a bondage to restriction and not eating anything. I eat everything. I don't have any banned foods at all. But I don't feel the need to secret eat, binge. My relationship with food is right-sized most of the time now, because of the work that I've done with this. And that's why I want to work with as many people as possible to help them. Because I know, for me, there's no bloody way on this earth would I still be this way after 6.5 years if I'd not worked on this stuff. Absolutely no way. I would still have lost a significant amount of weight, but I would probably, be a size 20, rather, I was a size 26 to start with, and I'm now a size 14/16. So, it will give you a significant weight loss, and you will probably lose a lot more, but you will probably put it back on with all of these drivers that you've got, Michelle. I'm not going to lie to you. Without working on these, you will find it much, much harder. So, if you, and the last one was a physical pain driver. So that's quite self-explanatory. You eat because you are physically in pain. So you're trying to get away, your body's trying to get away from that pain. What can I do? Okay. So we have got these drivers that make us eat for pleasure, for basic human needs, for core feelings, or for emotional mastery. And at this stage, it should be pointed out quite clearly what your main drivers in your eating type is. You should have an individual specific plan of what you need to work on. Okay? So, if you've got an emotional mastery problem, you're going to have a core feeling problem. We usually get this in childhood when we aren't taught how to manage our emotions properly. It's no blame, but we do tend to be told things like, big boys don't cry, have a stiff upper lip. We are taught to push our feelings away rather than feel them and learn to deal with them effectively. There's no blame in that. We only know what we know, but particularly the British, it really is on this thing. We don't show how we feel and we keep it all inside, And I find clients all the time who just will not say what they want to say, and they'll just literally shove food on top of it to stop it coming out because they're so scared of the reaction that they're going to have. Because when they were a child, they weren't allowed to express their feelings. I remember I used to say, I was bored, and I'd get shouted at because I was bored. There was another situation in my family where I would do something and everybody would laugh. And it used to make me so angry and so upset. And I'd stand there, they'd start laughing at me, and I felt so ridiculed and so judged, and I would start to cry. And I'd just say, stop laughing at me. And they go, we're not laughing at you, we're laughing with you. And I go, but how can you be when I'm crying? I'm not laughing. And it was just like, my feelings were not validated. It was like, oh, stop it. Oh, you're funny. It's, I wasn't allowed to feel that and have that acknowledged. So I learned not to show it. I just learned not to say anything, not to show it at all, because it was too painful. I don't blame my parents for that. They didn't understand the effect it was having on me, but that is what happened to me. Let me go into explaining a little bit about some of these. So, emotional mastery. So what we know about the human condition from basic psychology is that whenever we have a behaviour that is rewarded in the brain with a good feeling, that behaviour gets locked in. That's fact. So there's also, with food, chemical and hormonal reaction. So we can see how that pleasure association gets set up. It records that as the right thing to do and hardwires it, so we repeat it. And in the early days, it didn't cause us any pain at all because we didn't have any consequences of that behaviour. We just ate food, felt great, You hear parents saying, oh my God, you're giving them sugar, they're going to be buzzing around the room. It doesn't cause the child any consequences. It might cause the adults around them, but it doesn't cause the child. And if it does, they don't associate that with the food. We just had pure pleasure from it. That was all it was. But as the years has gone on, what happens is that we start to have consequences. So we start to put weight on, we start to have type 2 diabetes, we start to have joint problems, we start to have high blood pressure, we can't walk as good as we wanted to. So basically, that is when we start to think this behaviour is not good. Because if it was just that we were getting pleasure out of it and it didn't have any consequences, we'd just carry on doing it. If I didn't have any consequences of eating chocolate, I'd be eating chocolate. There was no doubt about it. Because I really enjoy eating chocolate. So But if we get any pain, our basic design is to find and ease that pain. And our subconscious mind will go to the place where it knows it will get ease and pleasure. And if food is taken away before, we will unconsciously repeat. Okay? It is a basic survival instinct. Your brain is hardwired to find pleasure and reward and move away from pain or discomfort. I've said that over and over again, but it's so important. So you're working with your own physiology and you're working in the dark. And you're working with food industry also that tells you it's all about the diet. If only you eat this food, you'll be fine. If only you don't eat that food, it's fine. If you cut out sugar, if you cut out fat. If it was all about the diet, we wouldn't have a bloody epidemic. We really wouldn't. How many of us, if it was all about the diet, wouldn't have these problems now? Because we've been on bloody billions of diets. Between us, we could write 20 bestsellers about diets. But it's liberating to know there's an answer. Okay? So let's just talk very quickly about basic human needs. So Chloe Madison is what we call a family interventional therapist, and she is the person that works in the psychology behind Tony Robbins, if any of you have heard of him. And she says that there are 6 basic human needs. So these basic human needs are love, variety, significance, growth, connection, and there is one other, I can't remember what it is. But in emotional eating, there are 3 that come up over and over again, and that's why I asked you about them. There was love, variety, and certainty. Okay? Security, certainty. So you were driven from a deep level to get them. It's a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you've ever seen that. You're driven from a deep level to get this need met. You need to feel love, you need to feel variety, you need to feel certainty, you need to feel significant. Connection was the other one. You need to feel connected. So, as I said before, we can't get rid of these, but what we can do is we swap them out with a different way of getting our human needs met. And when you work with me, I show you how to do that. Okay? So we've got the basic human needs. Now, coming on to emotional mastery and core feelings, which are the big ones for most people. So, whenever we have a behaviour that's rewarded in the brain with a good feeling, it gets locked in, like I said. So, but also if you think about the hormonal reactions we have to food, like cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine, it records it as a good thing to do because it's instant pleasure. And because I said before, it doesn't cause us pain because we didn't have any notion of body image, diabetes, illness, just pure pleasure. So it locks it in. And our core feelings, everybody feels it's part of your survival technique. We've got 3 types of feelings. We've got that gut feeling, which is that intuition. Apparently now we've found out that we've got brain cells in our gut that are attached to our brain, send signals from our guts to our brain. And that's that one that goes, oh, I'm not so sure whether I should do that. And it's more on what I call a sensation level. It doesn't really talk to you. It doesn't have any feelings. And then you've got a core feeling and you've got an everyday feeling. Okay? So the gut feeling is like a yes or no answer. Shouldn't do that, should not do that. There's no right or wrong. It's not right and wrong as such. It's not much language. It's more of a sensation. And if we override it, we know it. A core feeling is it varies in frequency or depth of feeling. So it will feel incredibly deep in the body, like it's disrupted. It isn't nice. It's usually painful. It's got language, if you can feel it. It's got a colour. It's got a taste. It can take your breath away. It can put you in bed. It can push you towards eating, drinking. It's like a gremlin. And I'll explain where they come from in a minute. But I want to explain the difference between a core and everyday feeling. An everyday feeling is related to a genuine short-term difficulty, but it doesn't latch on, and it doesn't stay as long, and it isn't as disruptive. So if you have an argument with a husband, etc. So we all feel, but we don't all feel with the same intensity. Now, some people are what I call mild feelers. My husband is a mild feeler. He doesn't have massive swings of intensity. His feelings are from here to here. I am what you call a wild feeler. I feel everything with massive intensity, excitement, and yay! And then when I'm sad, I'm right down there. Now that's great for some things because it means that I feel massive joy that my husband's never ever going to be able to experience. But it also means that when I'm feeling bad, it is so difficult for me not to try to move away from it. It's so difficult for me to sit in those feelings. which is what I need to do. I know that now. If I want to get over them, running away from them is never, ever going to solve it. So if you're a wild feeler and you feel pain more deep, then you're going to try and ease it even more. Now, core feelings usually come from a wounded place, something that happens from your experience that's caused you a difficulty. There's a big talk about adverse childhood experiences. They're called ACEs, which are, big things in people's childhood. And most people think that core feelings come from there, but they don't necessarily have to. They can just come from something simple that you personally found difficult. Like, for example, that person laughing at me. Well, I wasn't abused. I wasn't bullied. I wasn't, it wasn't a massive thing. I wasn't hit by my parents. But when they laughed at me, it was like they had literally wounded. It was like a wounded animal. Absolutely felt so ridiculed, so humiliated. So it was something that if I spoke to them about it, they wouldn't even remember the situation. But in my heart, I've made up my mind I didn't ever want to feel that again. So that core feeling was so big for me, but it was such an insignificant situation to somebody else that won't even remember it. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't have to be something really, really big. It's very often not the big stuff. The feeling that you have is going to light the way. So what you don't use your head, you use your heart. If you try and rationalise it with your head, you'll stop feeling it. And the only way to heal it is to feel it and learn from it. So part of this stuff is teaching you how to feel your emotions, how to name them, how to feel them, and how to soothe them and let them just go through your body and realise they're not going to harm you, they're not going to hurt you. And the only reason why your core feelings keep coming back is because you are fearful of them or because there's other feelings around them. But the good news is they can be undone and got rid of forever. So for example, what we do, and this is the problem, this is why we have to work on the emotional mastery before we can work on our core feelings. So I'm just going to rip some tape off here. Oops. Okay, so this is my core feeling of worthlessness. Okay, I feel worthless. I don't feel worthy of anything. Okay. Now, do I have a feeling about this feeling? What do I feel about this worthlessness? Do I just accept it? Or do I, when it comes, I feel worthless, what happens? I feel overwhelmed by it. I hate it. I resent it. I fear it. So I'm like, oh shit, that feeling again. Somebody snubbed me. Oh, I feel worthless. Oh God, I'm scared because I know it's going to last for ages and I'm finding it really hard to get out of it. So what I'll do is I get the worthlessness and I wrap it in fear. And then it gets bigger. And then I feel really overwhelmed by it because not only I've got the feeling of the worthlessness, I'm frightened. When's it going to go? Is it going to go? How bad is it going to be? I'm overwhelmed. I hate it. So I wrap it in overwhelm. And then I might wrap it in resentment or I might wrap it in hate. So what happens is we wrap these feelings in smaller feelings and that makes it even bigger. Which makes it an emotional mastery problem first because it's like an onion. We need to peel back these layers and get to the core feeling. Because what we normally do is we run, we hide, we eat. We never learn to sit with the feeling and what the feeling is telling us. And until we can unwrap it and work out how to deal with those little feelings, we're never going to get to the core feeling. Okay, so when I was ridiculed and they were laughing at me, I became afraid of showing my emotions. I was told I was too sensitive. So I was afraid of it. So don't show that you're sensitive. So it'd come up, they'd laugh at me, whatever. And I was so frightened of it that I was wrapping fear around it. I was wrapping embarrassment around that. I was wrapping shame. All of those other feelings were wrapped around it. So I became afraid of showing my emotions. So people are often told not to express their feelings and emotions. You're a bad person. If you're not taught how to master feelings, you can become scared and frightened of the feelings themselves. And this is an emotional mastery problem. So emotional mastery, in my experience, is the key absolute key to a successful life, relationships and everything. When you are an emotional master, you're a master at dealing with your own emotions, you can more or less manage anything. So you can see that your drivers can be sensation drivers, human needs and feeling drivers. But what we need to deal with to enable us to sort those things out are managing our emotions so we can feel everyday feelings. We can unwrap the onion and we can get to our core feeling. And then we can ease and soothe that core feeling and give that core feeling what it needed to begin with. So I'll give you an example. I have a core feeling. My big core feeling is abandonment or rejection. You know, my father committed suicide, as some of you know. When I was 12 years old, I felt terribly abandoned, terribly rejected. It was really, really difficult. And when that happened, there was no psychotherapist, there was nothing. It was like, Dad died on a Wednesday, funeral was the week later, went back to school on the Monday. It was never talked about again. You don't talk about it, you just get on with your life. So it was stuck inside me. Years and years later, I come to therapy, I do all this work, and I realise what that core feeling is. It's abandonment. And I have to go in there and find that core feeling and give that little girl what that little girl needed at that time. And that little girl needed to hear. So the other one is when people tell me I was too sensitive. What did that little girl need to hear? Well, she needed to hear, actually, you're not too sensitive, Amanda. Embrace that sensitivity, because that's what's going to make you a brilliant coach when you're older. That's what's going to make you really good at your job. So I can go back and speak to that little girl and say, it's okay to show you're sensitive because that's your shining light. I can go back and speak to that little girl and say, you know, I'm never going to abandon you. Okay? So, hi Amanda. Hi Caroline. So you can see that your drivers can be sensations, and emotional mastery is the main thing. Okay? So, next week, we need to look at the payoffs. So what are you actually getting out of the emotional eating? And that is often where the self-sabotage comes in. So we sabotage our success because we are gaining something out of the eating. And what I'm going to do is talk about that, and I'd like to try and do technology willing, a little bit of live coaching to see if I can identify sabotaging people and help them. It's not going to be a massive amount, it's going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but we can see where we can get. So if anybody wants to do some live coaching with me next week, send me a PM. I will do my very best to keep you safe. I will have to ask you some questions around that before I can do the live coaching with you to make sure that you're safe. As long as you're okay for other people to hear it and see it. So what happens is I will bring you in on the call. There'll be another box where you can be seen and everybody can hear what you're saying. So if you want to do some live coaching with me to try to unravel some of these core emotions, these feelings, and also self-sabotage, let me know. And I will chat to you in the week. So next week we're going to look at payoffs, because we don't engage in any behaviour that doesn't work for us. It is a solution in that moment. It is always giving us something. So we've got to find out what it gives us, and then we can find out how to turn it off. And if we can find out how to turn off what it gives us, and we can find out how to manage the drivers that we're driving it, we can soothe and ease those drivers, and then we can look at those emotions, that emotional mastery, and those core feelings, and get those, get rid of them, dissipate them, manage them effectively. Voila. Yeah? Okay. I hope that's been useful to some of you. It might be taking too long. Hi Sam. I'm sorry darling, we're just finishing. So you have to watch it on replay. But next week, same time, 7 p.m, Bariatric Mindset TV, episode 10, and that will be on the payoffs of emotional eating and self-sabotage. So be there, be square. Hope to see you next week, guys. If you watch this on replay, let me know. Okay, have a great evening. Thank you for watching, and I will speak to you soon. Lots of love. Take care.